welcome to Mental Growth Network podcast. And this is Yi Meandr. I am digital health expert and community leader. In this episode, we explore how the spaces we work in affect on our mental well-being, focus, and everyday performance. And our guest today is Patricia Friman, environmental designer, psychologist, and behavioral science researcher. She's an expert in sustainable and healthy way behavior relating to the built environment around us. Hello, Patricia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And we will start this podcast with exploring around the environmental design in general and how does this relate to psychology, because mostly we not really think that environmental design is directly related to our mental health. And this topic is quite interesting because we not really think about it. So please, if you want to continue, follow up, subscribe to our channel, leave some comments or questions to Patricia under this video, and we will start. So please, at the beginning, Patricia, can you a bit present yourself more, tell about your experience, and why are you interested today to discuss this topic?
Yeah, thank you very much for a nice introduction. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation as well to your podcast. Actually, my background is in architectural design. So I was educated as an architect, and I worked for many years within architectural practice. And slowly I started to think more about how do the people we design for, how do they perceive the environment that we design? How does it impact their health and well-being? And also just general kind of behavioral patterns. So that's kind of how I was introduced to this topic, through also participating in different organizations that promote health and well-being within the design environment. And then I moved to the Netherlands, where I got my further education in environmental psychology and architecture. So my background is a very uh, varied in that way, but I think that these both feed into what I'm doing at the moment and what I want to do with my career in the future. So when we look at how the environment basically affects people, there are different concepts and different approaches to this. Also, the natural environment and has a very big impact on our well-being, and so also long-term effects on our mental health. And we have a lot of evidence already to show that, and we can get into this later. And this is kind of what I found really fascinating as well, is how the built environment can have that impact on us. And there are many different aspects that we can talk about later as well that I'm really fascinated about this topic, and I hope that you are as well.
Thank you. And my question will be for you. First one, just the basic thing. What is environmental psychology and why is it important nowadays?
Yeah, it's a good question, because there are very many different approaches also to this. So I can just briefly explain to you where it came from originally. Environmental psychology became officially a part of a sub theme or sub category of psychology in the late 50s to 60s. So that's when it officially became known as environmental psychology. Before that, there were already experiments that were taking place, measuring the effects of specifically also the built environment on people's health, and it was known as architectural psychology. But it officially got a status as environmental psychology in the 50s to 60s. And since then, there was a huge boom in building. So people were interested in how the built environment, how they could create better spaces for people, workers, more efficient work performance, but also general health and well-being, because this was after the war. So people were also interested in the psychological impacts of environment. And it's interesting because later on it became more prevalent to think also about climate change. In the 80s to 90s, this became a more hot topic, so to say. So that's when environmental psychology also started to look at how people impact the environment and how do they think about the environment and what kind of impact that had on their behavior towards the environment. And so now I'm seeing, and this is kind of how we define it today, it's more of a circular phenomenon is that how people impact the environment also has an impact on them, and vice versa. So this is what I think is very interesting, is that it's literally a circular phenomenon where one impacts the other and the other impacts people as well. And yeah, so it's also relating to nature, but it's also relating to the built environment, the cities we live in, the places we work in. And that's what environmental psychology in a nutshell is.
I would try to redefine in some other way to understand myself. Is it true that in some case you can say that our persona, our personality or consciousness is kind of subject, yes, and environment is kind of an object. So we can say that whatever our inner state is interfering with some outside objects, this is whole this kind of environmental psychology. So it differs,
Yeah.
for example, from personal psychology when we have our subjective and other person's subjective interconnection. This is more about what is outside us and how it influences our inside. Is it correct or not?
Yes, yes, you're completely correct there. Thank you. Yeah, it's a nice observation because that's essentially what it's about. It's looking at the interaction between the environment and the people. But also internal states have an impact on how sensitive you are to environmental factors as well. So your values, your attitude, but also your general can complexify this interaction. So some people are more sensitive to the environment and also think more about the environment than other people. And this is normal. And these are the kind of fluctuations which we have to take into account when we research. But we try to find general tendencies of certain aspects that in general influence people's well-being. And this is it's difficult, but it's also interesting. And that's why we also need more and more research done in this area to be able to identify certain factors that impact how we think and how we behave. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it makes very sense. Then I have this weird question. I always wanted to ask this question to someone. Maybe you're this person. Like, but who created the chair? I was always thinking that that this straight line, when this square box, and they ask people to sit on it, it's like so weird because our body is not really like it was never been like straight lines with squares, like So is this also the type of environmental psychology? Because sometimes when I see furniture, I just thinking like, why you created it in this way? This is really looks absolutely geometrically unnatural, and sure you will feel uncomfortable and your back will hurt and you will like you will not think about food or office work. You will just really concentrate on their body because you feel uncomfortable. And is this just like simplifying things that people like imagine? I don't know. We just didn't thought that it should be comfortable, or how this idea of like if we talk about specific like object, for example, chair. Yes, how does it evolved? Can you tell about this idea and like more?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in ergonomics per se, but I do think that this idea of like how we sit comfortably as well, like the awareness of what makes us feel comfortable and more acknowledging. I mean, research help us also to put words into why does this not feel comfortable? And I think people who work a lot with ergonomics, they're able to better explain these aspects. But it's true. I mean, the environment has an impact on how we think and how we behave and how well we behave. What's the optimal behavior that we can um, perform in a specific environment, given the ergonomical aspect of like how you sit in a chair, what do you see, how do you feel, what does the so how do you interact with other people in these situations? And of course, comfort is a huge aspect.
So noticing for some leaders and managers, sometimes our mental health is not connected to direct mental health issues or operation flow. Sometimes it's just uncomfortable to sit in chair, yes, and if it happens every day, and then you have associations with your office that it's uncomfortable surrounding, uncomfortable colors that make you tension. It's already like really directly affects your mental health. So there is correlation like that. But let's a little bit dig more about that. Um, can if we talk about as you said, it's a very interesting phrase. You said, how do we perceive what is comfortable for us? So we can say that environment can program our behavior, And in this case, can you tell a little bit more? Is there a way how can we program our behavior using the existing environment? Yes. Or other words, what does it mean to support healthy behavior through sustainable design?
Yeah, there's it's a long question and it has a long answer, of course. I think with the environment, when people become more aware of what aspects in the environment can influence them and how it influences them specifically. Of course, this varies depending on, well, as we already acknowledged, the kind of person you are. But already becoming more aware of the environment through what you read and what you hear, what other people say, but also how you feel yourself. I mean, you need to become more reflecting of the specific environment you're in and how does that enhance or inhibit your behavior. And I think we as psychologists already have an advantage in that way because we have been trained to analyze and maybe have a certain tendency already to analyze our behavior and be so more reflective of how we work and how we interact with other people. So this is already um, in its personality, a part of our personality that we um, do. But I think anyone can be trained to think about these things and to become more aware of their own well-being and of their own mental health, and thus taking information that they feel like this supports my environment and this supports my well-being, and this is what I want to pursue. But it requires the curiosity of finding this information from research from experts in this field, and to also discuss with them, like and get the feedback of what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong, and how can I enhance the behavior of like working, doing more. If you do concentrative work, sorry, how does that how does the environment support that behavior? But we need to look at the specific activity that's going on and analyze it first and talk to the activity. And then we can work out a solution for that, an intervention. But it changes and it modifies, and you always need to continue doing it because nothing is stable. Nothing is, your mental health can also be impacted by your personal life situation. And so this is something you also need to be aware of and take into account. It's not only your environment that affects you, it's also your personal relationship or your financial situation that can already cause stress.
This is interesting topic. I will leave this one interesting idea about what affects us, yes, during that. But for now, I want a little bit, if you can share your more personal experience about, for example, some examples. This working environment, I worked there like that, or maybe you did some project and you noticed that this affected like that. And some
Yeah.
some more clear things. For example, I noticed this light affect me, or this, I don't know, geometry form or whatever it is, yes. And something is opposite, like this works like that, and I felt really, really like, I don't know, more down or more tired or whatever. And here I felt more uplifted or more calm. Can you share more like some examples from your life story?
No, my personal life, actually, when I started to think about my own mental health was when I worked in the office environment. And it's there are positive sides with working in, for instance, open plan spaces. And it's the open plan space. There's a lot of debates about that, how that affects people. But for my kind of when I realized like how much distractions and noises and these impact significantly how you can concentrate on your work. I was doing a lot of work that required concentration, and many people do that. So the more the work today is more mental work than it's more than physical work. But my experience was that I couldn't concentrate because I was always interrupted in this open plan space. And the benefits of being in open plan space is that you feel more connected with other people because you work in the same space. But that provides that you always do the same activity with other people, that people don't talk or don't interrupt each other. But that's not life. Because when you work in, say, projects or whatever your work is, you do interact with people on a daily basis. So then you see also the flip side. of being in an open plan in the same office space, and you can reach them easily because you can walk over to them and talk to them about whatever your work issue is. But then other people will be potentially distracted or annoyed as a result and stressed out because they can't concentrate on their work because they overhear what I'm talking with someone else. This is my personal experience from that. But I see that now with this theoretical understanding and the knowledge of environmental psychology, it really puts into perspective, like, what are the different like noises or basically sounds? How do they impact us and our ability to do different kinds of work? How do other people impact us? Noises have, if the noise or the sound you hear is noise, this has in the long term, this has a negative impact on your health. And this has been shown in research already in many different cases in workplaces. But also the visual distractions. When you see someone walking past, you will be affected by it, even if you don't even look at them. You know that there are other people, and other people affect you.
Let's maybe dig a bit deeper in this. You started to name some criteria that from the environmental science influence your mental health state. Can you try
Yeah.
to name like one by one different, a little bit more detailed? For example, noise.
Yeah.
Yes, noise can be, I don't know, calm or but whatever criteria. Then can be visual. Visual, what I don't know, light or what can be
Yeah.
else, something colors and so on. Can you name some factors from environmental psychology that can influence your mental health? Like, and a little bit tell about each of them.
Yeah. Well, we come to often what comes down into the research, what different factors impact our mental health is, as I said, the factors that stimulate all our senses. So, for instance, visual stimulation and visual distraction. Even if you're not looking directly at something, everything that happens around you, you still have an idea of what goes on around you, even if you don't look at it directly. So your visual attention is still driven by what's go on, what movements happen in your surrounding. Also, noises impact us, and this is maybe something that we're not as consciously aware as the visual field. And then also what we touch. When you come about the comfort thing, like what surfaces you are touching, also has an impact on your physical well-being and also your mental health in the long term. Temporarily, you can feel uncomfortable, and it doesn't have a long-term effect on your mental health, but when you look at long term, if you're always subjected to thermal discomfort, that's also one which has an impact on your comfort. It may impact your health, your mental health in the long run. Yeah, and then interestingly, what's also and has a direct impact on sustainability as well. When we talked about in the beginning about how sustainability comes into your mental health or your well-being in general. Light, and this is also something that's been researched for a long time already, how light impacts people. Uh, and light is basically a wide spectrum of different colors. But when it's all this spectrum together, it's light. Light is color, and color is reflected as light in different wavelengths. And neuroscientists can tell you more the details of how that impacts your brain. But environmental psychology already can see and measure how light positively impacts people's level of alertness and how they interact with their environment and also their well-being. Yeah, so light is one. And then also we have nature, access to nature, natural connectedness, or connectedness with natural elements in your surroundings. And for instance, what's been researched in environmental psychology is how what specific patterns in nature have an impact on us. Everything has an impact on us, of course, but specifically, for instance, studies on fractals. I don't know if you know what fractals are. It's a kind of
I know, but
natural
better if you say yes for it and with some examples. Maybe somebody don't know.
yeah. So a fractal or fractals are natural patterns. For instance, leaves are constructed of fractals. And so it's like a specific pattern or lines, for instance, that become a figure or a pattern that form a figure, a very kind of simple figure, repeated lines that go, and then those have lines that follow in different directions. And so they multiply. And it's almost a mathematical phenomenon. And that's a fractal when it's like a multiplication of a simple form or shape. And nature has this in many different, not just leaves, but other natural elements have these fractals. And those have been shown to have a restorative effect on people's attention. And attention restoration theory also talks about this, is how people's attention, which is important for their cognitive abilities, memories, and other. And so attention restoration theory, which was developed in the early 90s, about that time, Kaplan talked about, okay, so there's involuntary attention, then there's voluntary attention. Involuntary attention is what we do when we do active work. So when we engage in a work task, we think about what we should do and what we shouldn't do, or how we're supposed to strategize to do certain things. We actively use our voluntary attention, which is there is sustained attention, directed attention, make part of voluntary attention, right? And so we engage in that. But over time, if we engage too much in this, it becomes depleted in the long run. So what we need to do to maintain a balance between voluntary and involuntary, it's to engage in, for example, nature has a positive impact on our involuntary intention, where this allows for voluntary intention to replenish and become more like not to become depleted, right? So it can rest and it can replenish to then be used again. But this balance is essential for our well-being and for our mental health. And that's what I find really interesting. And nature has this unique ability to affect our involuntary attention, so that allowing us to rest and restore our voluntary attention again. Yeah. So
For me, it's very interesting. I was also thinking about this pattern of nature because I love nature and trekking, and I'm like this person who can live in mountains and in camp and feel very happy. But same time, I really good, and I was grown up in big city. I was born in Moscow. Yes, Moscow nowadays is going up to 20 million citizen, which is like a lot comparing, for example, to Barcelona, where I live now. It's like tiny, like a district of Moscow. And same time, I noticed that this feeling that if you go, for example, in some rural areas which are built especially in the 90s or 2000s and that are not really like bionical, they not have this fractal thing, they are more like hard designs and heavy, and I just can't like I didn't walk there. I just feel constant tension, and even sometimes I was thinking like what I feel like kind of a fear. I don't know why, but I just have this feeling of, I don't know, I want to go out of there. And same time, I notice when I go to some more, for example, districts which were built in 18th century, 19th century, or more modern ones, or like more bionical and using this fractal thing, I see that it's really nice and I feel much better. And this is not kind of my, I don't know, aesthetics. It's not about aesthetics. No, it is about aesthetics as well, but it's much more deeper. It's something that my body naturally just resist some type of this architecture. It just doesn't fit. It feels that this is unsecure environment.
yeah.
And this is what you say. How can you explain that? How it does it this works?
Yeah, I think nature has because of evolutionary theory and perspective on how nature has been such an important part of human being, their survival, but also their life. I mean, their life development and everything. So it's part of something why people have this attachment to nature and why it has such a profound effect on your well-being. Light, as we talked about, light reflects color. When there's a sunny day, you see colors in a different way than when there's a cloudy day. Still, there's the color because of natural light is present, but it's different. Um, and yeah, so this aspect of light and nature together has a very positive impact on your well-being. So when you design office spaces, this is something, and cities, as we talked about, this is something that should be more and more incorporated into cities, I think. And I think many other professionals also agree with this. We've come to find that cities that incorporate nature, um, in the Netherlands, where I live, I live in a city that has a lot of nature that comes into the city, and that's planned with respect to nature. And I feel great in the city. Of course, this is my subjective feeling, but also knowing that we have evidence to support this, you see those things more, and you start to notice them within yourself, that going outside feels nice because there is light, there's water as well. Water has a positive impact. Also, the sounds which happen in nature with birds and different animals, that is also often positive. You can't say that it's always that case, or you find that it happens. And then what again has a maybe negative effect, and that comes back to this noise aspect. I did research specifically on soundscapes, and I found that an indication of that other people have an effect on the capacity for a person to do like a task that requires mental, like working memory and mental capacity to direct your attention at something. So that's what I was looking at. They were doing a sort of a task on the computer where they had to concentrate and memorize what was shown to them. And they did perform worse on this task when they were listening to sounds of other people. So other people affect other people more than they maybe think. And this is kind of what came out of this research. And this is something I would be interested also to do further, to develop further, is how other people affect other people. Nature had a really positive effect on the performance on the task. And this is also supported by previous research, which I found really interesting.
Yes, it's really interesting because I know some people who can say, for me, it's hard to concentrate when I'm alone. I like to go to library. I like to go to space where everyone is working because my mind is less destructive. I less use social media. For me, easier to just sit and work. But other people would say it's like so distracting with all these people, and you kind of feel what like they doing, and even if they are silent, stickly like moving, stretching something, we like, oh, this noise, yes, and it's a little bit individual. Is there like again some pattern about that, or it's just
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah. You like pointed out there something that's really important to acknowledge now, is that it really depends on the kind of activity you're doing. And that's what you need to analyze, is like, what is the work that you do and what does that require? Does it require concentration and like a quiet space? Is that where you can work the best? Then that's something that needs to be pursued within this type of workspace. Um, if you're, for instance, working with, I don't know, sales, or being like talking to people, being social, those skills, the spaces that support those skills should be enhanced in the workspace. So there you can interact with others, there you can talk. And that again is a different activity from concentrated work. So you need to recognize what's the activity that you're doing and how does the environment enhance those activities. Generally, we've talked about generally light has a positive effect. So that can be regardless of whatever work you do. But whether you perceive something as noise or something as enhancing your capacity to do whatever you do, what activity is that that you're engaging in? That really depending on what the work requires and what's the focus of that work.
Interesting. I also practice this even myself. Sometimes, no, I very often work from home because I already many years working online or in my own projects. And I sometimes for me hard to do all the work in the same place, and I have this kind of game. For example, this is my table. I don't know, for networking. When I sit there, I'm like super good and charismatic leader, and I can like I don't know sail, and I can like I don't know network. And this is my concentrated like Zen table. I like go there and I like silent, and I do some interesting brainstorm and research. It's kind of acting, and I was thinking about that maybe it's kind of, and I have different ways at explaining it to myself why I do like that. Sometimes I think it's kind of ADHD, maybe signal that I can't like sit in the same place, but same time it's make me more efficient. I just feel that this is like small games. It's make my work more interactive. So this chair for that, that is for that. It's my kind of self programming, but same time it does work. So this is if we can imagine that we work for employees, yes, and we can create one space to like have this more vibe, yes, and this one is for this more vibe, and this they can interact with each other, and this is more healthy that we can do kind of middle one for everyone the same. Yes, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Yes, and that's the thing, is like to acknowledge, okay, what are the factors that generally support people's well-being or their capacity to do the work that they do? But of course, you need to analyze then, okay, what is the work? But generally, having spaces where you can get more natural light, to orientate the spaces to receive more natural light. Also, using glass allows natural light to pass through. Um, and then those are the general aspects. But then to recognize the specific activity that goes on within the space and how you can separate or allow those spaces to be reached in a sort of the same environment, but that they're still separate because the activity is specific to, for instance, talking and discussing, whereas concentrative work should be a little bit separate from that because there you don't want to talk maybe to other people. You don't want to be interacting with others because you need to concentrate on what you're doing. So there you need to acknowledge that these two activities are so different. You need to in some way separate them, right? If they're in the same space, you can use furniture or different textures that um, have acoustic qualities, which can separate that activity. So you don't hear or see what's going on, and that then you can concentrate better. You always notice that people put their headsets on if they want to concentrate. But in the long run, maybe you don't want to wear your headset. So then you feel a bit constrained by the environment because you can't do your work because everyone's talking or moving around and things. So yes, you need to have a workspace that allows for your activity and for you to be able to choose where you want to do your activity at what time of the day. And that constructs in the long run, that has a positive impact on your capacity to do your work, but also your mental health within your workplace.
Yes, and we are so much talking about how different environment spaces affect our state, but what to do for those people who maybe not psychologists, they didn't practice meditation 10 years or Qigong, yes, but they not really sensitive. Like, how can you develop this feeling? How are there any simple ways how to measure how mentally supportive a space is or is not?
Yeah, there are different ways you can measure. Of course, you need to first observe and analyze what the activity goes on in that space, right? And you can ask people directly, but you can also observe their behavior. That's a type of study. What we do is that we observe behavior. But what maybe is more effective is also when you incorporate observing and asking people, interviewing them. So how do you feel in this space? Um, you can build a prototype space, which is a controlled space where you can control the amount of light that comes in, that control the amount of like how it's ventilated, what kind of ventilation is used, what kind of materials are used, or what colors are used, or how much green elements such as plants are in this space. And when you control space, that's where you can more actively measure when you take away, for instance, plants and you have plants in another room. So in comparison to the plant-rich room, say you're working in a greenhouse or something, versus somebody who works in a greenhouse without plants. What's the difference? What can you see in terms of the way that they respond to how they feel in that space? Or their heart rates. You can measure their heart rates as well, like how, and if there are other people, can somebody concentrate with other people in the same room or when they're alone? So you can create these situations in a room, which you can control at least to some extent. I mean, you can control it perfectly. You can control their internal state, right? But when you do research on several people, you can see this tendency. Okay, so how do they feel in an environment which has more windows or has more people or has more plants than somebody who in an environment who doesn't have that? But this requires a lot of research into that, which is of course a kind of investment in terms of the work, those who want to focus on their workers' well-being. They need to do this research to really get to the bottom of like how do our employees feel in these spaces, and that's really thorough. But Then we also have a new technology, which is called eye tracking, which I also sort of followed on how it's been done. And eye tracking follows the eyes, the movement of the eye. And it's connected to a computer where you can then see, okay, within this space, for instance, okay, you have on the computer, you have an image. What do people look at in the image? And you get this sort of map of how the eye movement moves around the image. And from there, you can already tell what draws people's attention in the specific image or in the environment. There are also mobile versions where you can move around the environment and you can see what people tend to look at. And so this gives you an indication of what attracts their attention. And then you can investigate further why, how, and how can we enhance it if this is what they feel like it's interesting, you know?
Um,
So there are very many different ways you can measure this kind of activity
this is we talk about.
cognition.
This is we talk about more how can we measure our employees, or for example, if I'm a therapist, how can I do a chance, or if I'm CEO or CEO or whatever. But for example, if I myself, I don't have like team, I don't have this big amount of investment, but still maybe I get used to my office. I work in the same office maybe 2 years, and kind of I'm get used to it. But at some point, I decided to question myself: is it really like comfortable what I'm doing right now, right here, or not? Is there any specific
Yeah.
self measurements that can help you to understand how this office and the environment setting influence on you?
For the time being, to my knowledge, there doesn't exist any tools that specifically measure this that would help you personally. It's more about staying informed and finding out what knowledge is out there already that says these things. Like, do you when you sit next to a window, also to start thinking about how does that make you feel if you switch to like from the window to the corner of the office where there is no window. How is that different? So I think there is a kind of skill also to be trained in terms of when you move around the space, how does it make you feel? And to really try to like acknowledge or to become aware of how you feel. And I think that's maybe something that perhaps for some people it's natural to ask how they feel and to think about how they feel in certain spaces. They're more sensitive to environmental changes. Whereas maybe other people are not and they have to work a little bit harder. There, with the advancement of technology as we see, is just increasing at a rapid rate. I think there's possibility to really start to, with help of technology, also to become more aware of how you feel in an environment. But at this stage, um, at least to my knowledge, there is not yet really those kind of gadgets. Maybe someone has already started to develop something that we will know in a couple of years. Maybe.
I would say that to kind of make some conclusion out of it, that the best gadget is your own body. Yeah, you need just start to ask yourself questions. How do I feel right now? How do I feel in this chair? Yes, how do I feel in this environment? So this skill is a skill of self-awareness and feeling grounded in your body. This help you to understand how it works. So maybe such skills as diary, or as you said, comparison. For example, you can be in your office setting, and then I don't know, you go to some modern biotech, I don't know, organic co-working space. You just like rent their room for like, I don't know, 1 week, and you can feel what is the difference. And then using the comparison, using some ideas, you can understand that, so this is more optimal space. So this is kind of self responsibility. We don't have any specific, guidelines, measurements. Yes, you need to develop your own sense of truth, your own sense of harmony.
I think that's important in any life situation is to start developing a skill to be more in touch with your own feelings and comfort. Like what and yeah, I mean, maybe it's more natural for some people than others, but it's not impossible to learn that skill. Um, but it may take some more time and effort, but also creativity and interest in trying different things, like trying to move your desk in front of your window, or do you enjoy looking down, like on what's going on? Like if you have a view of nature, maybe you want to enhance that, and this is the effective way to enhance it into your workplace. And also one aspect which is important, and maybe it comes now kind of natural to my head, is like I'm thinking of like, okay, we have evidence to also suggest that looking out the window, overlooking some scenery has a positive impact on our restoration and our ability. And this also comes back to the survival instincts of people with like, you know, our ancestors. To overlook a space also gives you safety because you know kind of what's at the horizon, so you can prepare. And that's the kind of like evolutionary perspective on psychology. Um, and then to just test out, okay, so how does that feel? But if for whatever reason that doesn't work for you, then you need to test something else. What's the space? Do you feel more protected when you sit with the back towards the door? Usually we find sometimes that people don't. They want to know, to be able to look at their environment and see who is there, and then to feel protected maybe with like a wall behind their back so that they can concentrate and they don't, because if you don't know what's going on behind you, you might feel a bit unprotected. But these are just kind of feelings where you need to adapt yourself, the environment, or moving your space to where you feel like, now this is when I want to concentrate, I want to sit here. And actually I think that now there seems to be a huge movement going on where people don't have a specific workstation. They can move to different workplaces and do different kinds of work. If they work in a group, they can move together with a group somewhere, book a room so that they can be there undisturbed and work on whatever project they're working on. So these mobile workstations have become more of a thing within offices. And what we find from research is that when people have some sort of influence on their environment, they also feel better. When they can decide how they work and when they work, this has a long-term positive effect on your mental health because you can sort of control at least one aspect of that environment.
Yeah, I also wanted to highlight this topic that maybe for some business owners or people, they think, wow, so I need like invest so much. I need to do studies, research of time, or I don't know, I need to invite environmental designer and we need to reinvent our office. But sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes you can think about maybe moving somewhere. And it is normal thing. For example, just yesterday, 2 days ago, I had this experience. I'm having specific place nearby Poblino Park where they do evening qigong with some friends, and we had the same space, but this time some people come there, and I was just we had small talk, and what was interesting about that they excluded some hours from morning time, and we decided to meet in the evening to have a good brainstorm session, and it costed them 3 hours. So what they did
Yeah.
first hour is just funny team building type of activities. I don't know, jumping, doing fun, something joke, something to really let go this. I don't know how to say it scientifically, but more like ego. That we are too much afraid to show ourselves like that or like this to feel more safe. It was more like about being children without borders. And after that, they kind of calmed down a bit, and then we just started brainstorm for a specific topic. And it was, in the park nearby the sea. It was, some different feeling. Of course, they maybe can try to do it in the same office space, but
Yeah.
it didn't cost much. You don't need to have a team building for the weekend, rent an expensive hotel. It's just like you went in the same city in the park and you did all the things and you grab, I don't know, picnic blanket, and it was so cheap, so nice, and it totally refresh everyone. And these small hints, it's like everyone can use it.
Yeah.
And continue this topic of like budgeting. I want to ask you about homework workspace. How can someone improve their home workspace even on budget?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is interesting because it comes back to this same idea of like the small things that you can do in the workspace, but also at home. I mean, for instance, when you have furniture that can sort of maybe create a kind of spatial separation between your home, like every day when you go to sleep, your living room, your kitchen, like different spaces that have other kinds of activities which might interfere with your work. And so maybe to create some sort of spatial separation between your workstation visually to separate that space, but also maybe adding acoustical things. There's this really cool chair which has quite recently, maybe a few years back, came in onto the market, where the space or the space within this chair is kind of like a form of an egg, but it has a very studied to the detail of how the sound it isolates you from the sound environment outside, only using specific angles and material within this chair. And I thought it was very fascinating, because this is something, when you think about you don't want to be disturbed from what's going on around you, you can sit in this chair and it will take away a lot of the noise. Of course, you hear something, but it's kind of like these headsets that also cancel noise out. But this is a chair, and through a unique design, it isolates you, not completely, but more from the external environment. Then also this aspect of looking into nature or having plants is also shown to have a positive impact. So that's something you could also increase.
Want to interfere you a bit? So, dear podcast listeners, if you know any like this, I don't know, gadgets, any interesting objects of chairs and tables, and if you tried some, please share under this video in the comments. For example, this egg chair, or if you experience something else, it will be so interesting if we can share some hints how to make your workspace even better, even more comfortable. It will be so nice. And please continue, Patricia. What else, any more advice for our listeners? How can they budgetly improve their workspace?
I think that's also like, I mean, we talked about the furniture, but like also maybe colors, like to use different colors, but not, because then again, when we use specific colors, and this comes back to like color therapy, for instance, how different colors impact people. And so how can you enhance a workspace which maybe supports that specific activity? So if you wanted to concentrate your work, you might use more cooler colors, because the short wavelengths that cool colors such as blue or green have, for instance, they could they sort of create a calm atmosphere. And well, you can look more into color therapy to be more specific. I'm not going to go into more details. But definitely the different colors have an impact on how well you can do concentrated work, or how well you can focus on something. Or if you want to meditate, if that's the end goal, what different colors could enhance that? What different plants could enhance it? Also smells. I mean, it's about all your different senses. So really, with these small things, and also the ergonomics of the chair, coming back to that topic, it's really important to study, um, to have a good chair. Uh, Maybe that doesn't squeak. That's preferable as well, because that creates a noise that may be annoying in the long run to always hear and listen to when you move around your chair. And desk, also having this adjustable desk, this is a very interesting thing, because coming back to like also the physical activity. I mean, people have found that we positive effect on your mental health and well-being. And so changing this position and the place where you work has a long, but it's always a balance between everything. If you do too much of that, you may just become tired and it doesn't work for you. So you need to balance these things. But yeah, physical activity, I didn't mention that, but yeah, it definitely also is important to have. How do you place a staircase in an office is important, because if the first thing you come in through the door, you see the elevators. Of course, you're going to take the elevator because it's the easiest way to get to your office if it's on the second floor or third floor or higher up. But if the elevators is not the first thing you see, like a visual connection, but the first thing you see is a staircase, we've seen that these small adjustments can have an impact on how people, like, if they use the stairs or not. But if the stairs are tucked away somewhere, nobody's going to go look for the stairs. I mean, it doesn't, unless you have you want to walk the stairs for some reason. But these design decisions have an impact on how people behave. And also, coming to sustainability, I mean, if people use the stairs, they're feeling healthier, but they're also reducing the amount they would take the elevator, which is it's energy, right? It's using energy through technology, the building, the cost of energy of using the building, like electricity cost, will essentially increase the more people use elevators, or the more people use lighting. If you enhance natural light, you don't need to use lighting that much. So you will reduce the cost also of light. So sitting next to the window or having more glass walls, that could also have a positive impact. And that's something that we've seen. And people also maybe feel themselves as well. They feel better in those spaces. So glass walls could provide a good like isolation from like noise and sounds that are distractive, but still it allows natural light to pass the spaces or to come into the internal environment. That's yeah. So there are many different things that could impact, and that people, when they become more aware of, they can also impact their environment.
Yes, it's very interesting everything, and it reminds me Atomic Habits, this book. I don't know if you ever read it. And the person who wrote it, he one of the idea that he suggests that our living environment should reflect your goals and your values. For example, when you wake up, first do you see? I don't know. You can see the pictures of your family. Then you go, you see some, like, for example, sports gym, and then you have one idea. Or you can see the piano because you want to develop your, yes, music skills, or something like that. And the same about the work. If your work is nearby the fridge or in the kitchen, yes, it all the time will kind of make your attention there. So in general, when we talk about environment, we should understand that in some cases, like UX, yes, or user experience, in some case that you directly inside this, space, yes, and you somehow create associations that are necessary for you, and this association can overdose you or can balance you, yes, depending on the colors, about the lighting, about the noise at which they, about the geometry, comfortability, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So this podcast was about us to understand that mental health is more deep sometimes, and that it's related to the environment as well. And how does it relate? I hope you, dear podcast listeners, understand today. If you have any questions and if you want to share your own experience, again, please share comments. We will try to answer you as fast as possible. And before,
One additional thing I came to think of is that the importance is also like to, for those who design workspaces, to include also more psychologists, because psychology is still a very young science, but there's so much we can learn also from different fields in psychology. Also, organizational psychologists know about how to improve workers and employees' mental health. And so when environmental psychologists can work together with human resource experts and organizational psychologists, but also managers, project managers, architects, and engineers, when we come together, these can also have a positive impact on the whole design process. And it's very important. So,
yeah, thank you so much. This is one of the idea in general of Mental Growth Network as a community. This is what we try to do. We try to match different experiences, different people from the fields related to mental health, directly or indirectly. Because yes, as you said it, and you said it very nicely, then mental health is still young science, and we underestimate how it influences. And for example, me as a podcast holder, the more guests come, the more I understand that mental health is so interconnected between everything, because we would say that human consciousness starts from, like, mental health. Mental health is kind of our self in some case, and how our self interacts with many layers, and how to do it in healthy way. And what does a healthy way means in small thing. For example, relationship health, yes, environmental health, yes, I don't know, workspace health, organizational health, and so on and so on. This all kind of combines this together. So I hope we, for some listeners, we help this to broaden their perspective. Again, please don't be afraid. It's too much. It's too overwhelming, because also somebody is in burnout. It's okay, little by little. Yes, we do interaction. We help the world. Yes, we help us to get the science better. Yes, and hope it will also inspire you to do some more research, or at least for your own self, try to, I don't know, move a bit some objects in your room. Yes, try to, I don't know, buy a plant, do more light. Yes, do something simple things. Again, test your chair. Maybe you can buy some modern one, some, I don't know, osteopathic one, or whatever. Yes, explore. Yes, be a little bit curious about environmental psychology, and sure you will have some benefits for your own productivity and health.
yeah. Great.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for this podcast. It was really very
Well,
interesting.
thank you very much.
Yes, and you very inspired.
Thank you.
And thank you, dear listeners, as well for your attention. And see you soon. It was Yi Meandr, digital health expert and community leader in our Mental Growth Network podcast. And it was Patricia Friman, environmental designer, psychologist, and behavioral science researcher. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
bye bye.
Have a good evening. Bye.